I guess I shouldn't pretend that we just haven't been already chatting for the first 25 minutes.
No, I
Like
think it's,
we just jumped on the call.
what? Hey,
Hi, how are you? Because I already know how you are. Um, so I think today we're just going to focus on the AMA questions that have come in from listeners because these have been collecting. I think we answered some maybe on the second episode and then nothing since then. So these have just been accumulating. Is that the word?
accumulating,
Yeah, you can tell
accumulating.
I've got a lot going on right now. So let's dive into the first one. So, and I don't know necessarily what episode each one, some of these are clear what episode they came from of ours,
Sure.
but some of them I don't really know. So Rachel in Tempe, it's a fellow
Hi,
Zoni.
Rach.
Hi, Rach. Um, asks, what is the thing that you admire most about each other? Conversely, what is the thing that you dislike most about each other? Well, let's stay
Way
on
to
that
start a
plane.
fight, Rachel.
Yeah. I think we should start with the thing that we dislike most about each other and then the thing that we like most. That way we end on a good note.
Okay, I think that's a great idea.
I think this is interesting too, because in Kabbalah, like the Kabbalah 1 course, there's actually this one part where they tell you to call somebody and ask them, like, what's one thing that I could do better? Or like, what's
I
one
like
thing about
that.
me that you don't like? And it's interesting, like, because you think you know what they're going to say, but then they
Right.
say something very different and you're like, oh. So
I'm gonna
yeah.
do this at work. I honestly am. I'm gonna take this to work and fire off. But I'm gonna go ahead and go first because we've already
Okay.
talked about it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a safe one for me. Um, we've discussed uh your unwavering sense of justice. There's
Mm-hmm.
no gray area, and you can't let things go until you deem them fair. That's my, like, it
Yeah.
drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not. I say this about a lot of people because I feel like I attract these type of people in my life. It's not that you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll never argue that. It's not that you're wrong. It's just there's no like, oh, but it would be easier if I just let it go. You can't let it
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And I work with people like that too. Especially when it comes to like changing the which exam it should be or something like that. And they're like, no, I'm changing, and I'm like, just let it go. And they're like, no, no, like it needs to be this. And I'm
Yeah.
okay, you're not wrong, but Jesus.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that you seem to attract people like this, because now I wonder, like, this is again like a Kabbalah principle, is that when you're presented by things that like irritate you or frustrate you over and over and over again, like that's telling you that that's something like your tikkun or
That you
your
need to work on
yeah,
for
that you need to
sure.
look at, so it's just interesting that you said that. I mean, obviously, I think I texted you and was like, the idea is that you picked your family, you picked all the people in your life before you even enter this incarnation, specifically because they're going to challenge you, test you, pull these things out of you. And yeah, so I'm
Amen.
like, I did a dang good job picking those people.
All right, your
I would
turn.
say the thing I dislike most about you, I hmm, I mean, it's interesting because I think I would say that this is maybe also the thing that I admire most about you. I think it's maybe just an extreme, but your ability to compartmentalize,
Oh yeah,
but sometimes to an
too well,
extreme. Yeah.
too well.
Yeah. Like not letting
Where
the
I
emotions of others or yourself like really play into, it's just
for
like this
sure,
very boxed off.
I get that
Yeah.
100%. I can't even argue with that. Which, and you nailed it. Sometimes that's at the detriment of other people who actually need to have their moment. And I've already closed the box. Like, and I think some of that comes from my job.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I finally got to get Jim to go to the hospital with me, and he got to sit in the department, which is the first time he has seen my job the entire time I've been doing it. So
Yeah.
for our whole relationship, he knows what I do. He's never actually seen it,
Hmm.
and it wasn't even a horrible night, but he saw enough that he was like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that, like, when you say it's a bloody mess, you meant a bloody mess." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yep."
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it was a really good way for him to understand that I don't have the opportunity at work to cry about what's there, or to be
Yeah.
grossed out, or like I've got a job to do, and
Yep.
so I have to just put it in a box, put the box away. And I've gotten better about unpacking those boxes later on, but um and that comes across. I mean, you've got family members there sometimes with a patient, and I
Yeah.
know it comes off as clinical. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel horrible about it myself when I'm, they are worried about comfort and explaining things, and I'm worried about time
Yeah.
and making sure you don't bleed out on the table,
Right.
kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah, which I guess in that sense, that's the side of like the compartmentalization that I appreciate or admire about you, is that you are able to like separate yourself from that and focus on like, okay, what's the most important thing right now is patient care and making sure that, you know, the task is done.
Right.
And even sometimes in some of the, I would say like familial situations or just
Sure.
life and personal relationships, that I think it's a benefit sometimes that you're able to just be like, this is in that box. I'm not going to attach to the story. I'm not going to attach to the drama. You know, you've always,
Right.
I think that's where like your good mediation skills come in, where you're just like, look, I'm not paying attention to anybody's story. This is just like, let's just look at the facts here. Okay. Everybody needs to settle down.
And I said exactly that, but when you say it back, I'm like, God, that's rude. I'm not paying attention to anybody's stories. And I literally said that. I don't give a shit
Yeah.
what you've got going on. I'm here for this.
Yeah.
So fuck off.
But in the same sense too, I mean, there's been times that like I have the story and I'm like, you know, bitching about this and this and this, and you're like, yeah, but look at it from maybe this perspective too, and helping me to see maybe from an empathetic perspective what somebody else
Right.
might be going through that would make them act or react the way that they do, kind of
Right.
thing. So
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
What do I admire most about you?
Don't say my to-do
Um,
lists.
oh, they're impressive though. Um, I guess one of the things that I admire most is I get it's probably one of the things that's in the top of Drive Me Nuts as well, though. Like, you can reinvent, not reinvent, you decide how it's going to be, and you're incredibly good at getting it done the way you want it done. And then I'll go irregardless of anybody else. Um, and that's the bad side. But I mean, we've talked a lot like about when you first moved to Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's like you just were like, and this is what I'm going to make my life. And I was like, you can't just make your life what you want it to be. And you're like, the fuck I can't. And then you proceeded to like systematically do everything you wanted to do. It was a huge lesson for me. And I think I've probably caught on well enough to mimic that pretty good. I still struggle with certain I'm married, so I have another half that I can't quite just say, and
Yeah.
this is the way it's gonna be.
Free reign.
Um, right. But like that was a huge life lesson for me, that if you don't like it or you want something different, that you just do it.
Yeah.
And I have really struggled, but I mean, I've tried incessantly since then to take that as a life example.
Mhm.
And so I really admire that, because you're like, and this is the way I am now. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Just roll with it,
Yep.
compartmentalize it.
Right.
Okay. So, Rachel, I hope that answered your question and gave you some insight into this relationship. Okay. So, the next one comes from Jeff with the G and an O in Dover. Do you pronounce this Jeff, or is it
It's Jeff.
okay?
I promise.
Okay. Anywho's, the last episode hit really hard. I think that a close friend of mine is an alcoholic. Any advice on how to help him? Oh boy.
Oh, don't. Which sounds horrible. That's my first instinct. Don't. You can definitely always be there. I don't know that there's a help thing.
Yeah. I mean, your friend has to want help
Yes.
before you can intervene. And if they want help, then yes. I mean, I think be there for your friend, but don't be attached to the outcome of it. If they end up deciding they don't want help, or they fall off track again, that's not on you. That's on them.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
I guess I would go a little bit further. It's not necessarily something you have to do as much as be available.
Mm-hmm.
Love that person no matter what. I think so. I feel like addiction, you you are like purposefully pushing people away.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're already a little jacked up for the day, then you cancel all your plans, and you come up with a really lame excuse, and then you feel shitty about canceling, so then you go ahead and use or drink or whatever. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know who said it, but it's like the opposite of addiction is connection. um
I think that
it's
was Young
not,
Pueblo,
yeah, it's
actually.
like not drinking. It's not the opposite of drinking is not drinking. It's connection. It's having someone there that loves you no matter what. When I say that, you can still have boundaries. You don't have to be a sucker. Um, but making it very apparent that you're there no matter what, and that may be 3 a.m. really drunk phone
Mm-hmm.
calls, or but knowing that you've got friends that'll accept you no matter what, it goes a long way to wanting to, for at least for me wanting to change. I had friends that
Mm-hmm.
knew that I was messed up at the time or whatever, and they were like, yeah, like we don't want to, we're not condoning it, but if
Right.
you ever want to talk, you ever, we're always here for you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was huge.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, kind of a hands-off way that you can help without having to feel like you have to get that involved in it is find resources for them. Find the local AA chapter and meeting times. Those people are equipped to help in that sense. Um, I know not everybody's ready to go to AA and just like full on
No,
admit
and I
that
would
I'm an
I would say
alcoholic kind of thing, but
if someone says, hey, I want to get some help, then I think that's a great suggestion, is like,
Mhm.
what can I do to facilitate this?
Right.
What legwork can I do to get it done? But I guess I would think that if you went up and said, hey, and I feel like people kid glove it sometimes and do this whole like beat around the bush sort of thing. Like,
Mhm.
do you think you're drinking too much?
Yeah.
Like, no, like I feel like sometimes that direct route of, hey, like I understand you're drinking a shit ton lately.
Mhm.
There's no room for
Yeah.
argument there. Like, you are drinking a lot lately.
Yep.
Just want you to know, if you need to talk, if you need to, you know, and also it helps a lot. At least it did for me when I was not drinking. Um, to have things to do that didn't center around drinking.
Yeah.
Like, there were all. It's really hard. Well, not nowadays. I was gonna say it's really hard to get blasted at a movie. Um,
Right.
you know, so, but
No, and
there
that's
were
the
things
hard
that
thing
people
about
did.
this in particular is that, I mean, we talked about this when we talked about, you know, the sobriety, you choosing to be sober, is that there's so much of our cultural norms are centered around drinking and alcohol. I mean, perfect point. Movies now, you can go and you can just drink while you're watching a movie. And that used to be something that was very sober friendly. There's so like run clubs. What do? They go run and then they meet up at a bar and they drink
Right.
after
No,
it.
for sure.
Same thing with hiking, almost in a sense. It's like we've so normalized alcohol being a part of like these activities that
Every
typically
single
didn't
activity.
involve booze. So it makes
But
it
there's
hard.
also lots of restaurants that don't have liquor licenses. And like those are great choices to invite someone out to. And then, I mean, what are you going to do? There's nothing on the menu to order. So,
Yeah.
and that's a way to be there for part of the evening. And then if they want to go out and drink, they're going to go out. You're not going to stop someone from going out and trying one on.
Yeah.
But maybe you can get your good 2 hours out of the beginning of it. And I mean, I don't know. The biggest
Yeah.
thing was having friends that it was a safe space that I knew there wasn't going to be drinking or drugs
Yeah.
or, you know,
Yeah.
it was nice to be able to go over to their place and know that it just wasn't going to be taught. Like, it's not that it wasn't going to be tolerated. It just wasn't going to be offered.
Right. Yeah.
Like that was, they were not about that life. So,
Yeah.
and they made it a point to stay very, very involved in my life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. I think if you approach it with non-judgment, a sense of transparency, like you're saying without the kid gloves, where it's like, here's just the truth about it.
Yeah.
I'm concerned because I feel like you are drinking way too
Yep.
much.
Yep.
And then just like being that supportive friend, helping with finding resources if that's the direction that they want to go. But I think, yeah, and then not attaching to the outcome. Like you can't just, I think that's a hard one. I think when you get involved with somebody who is addicted and they start maybe on the recovery process and you're like, I think almost everybody that I know that has been addicted and gone through that process has fallen off the wagon several times before they got to the
Oh,
point
for
where it was like
sure.
said and done. So don't be disappointed with that. Don't get
Yeah.
attached to like it's going to be a one and done.
No, relapse is
So
part of recovery.
yeah, 100%. 100%. So hopefully that helps Jeff with the G in Dover. So this one's a local one for me, but this is I don't know. I don't think it's a little bit creepy, but in a sense it's a little bit creepy. But Kevin in Tucson sent in,
What's up, Kev?
yeah, hey Kev. I think this is interesting though, because I was supposed to be named Kevin when when the parents thought I was a boy. Surprise.
Kevin Mark.
It was the first surprise. So I have to admit that I did a little stalking and looked at your Instagram page. Why are you still single? Well, this is a really long story, Kevin. Which I'm just gonna try to.
I want to jump in first and say, Kevin, Instagram is not a real life representation of anybody's life. The end.
No.
But way to market yourself, sis.
Well, and it was funny because he's like, I did a little stalking and looked at your Instagram page, and I'm like, I don't know, is that stalking? Because like I have the podcast and I direct people to my Instagram page, so right. I'm like, I don't think you're really stalking in that sense, but okay.
At
least I think it was my business.
I just stalked everybody at work.
Yeah, I mean, I stalk people on Instagram all the time.
Right.
So
it's not really stalking.
No,
because the intent is what makes it stalking. But we all use that word. So continue. Yes. Why are you still single, Chris?
I mean, there's just a whole plethora of reasons. You know, I would say like currently, why am I still single right now? Because I am focusing on doing the work on myself right now. I'm just in that place where it's like, I realize that I need to do some deep dives on myself. I think relationships are difficult. They take a lot of work, and I don't feel like I have the space currently to continue to do the work on myself and be able to give what I know is needed in a relationship. Now, for the last, oh my gosh,
10 years.
14 years that I've been single.
14. I was trying to
Yeah.
be generous. Okay.
I know. It's been a lot of different reasons. I divorced. I wanted to take some space after that happened to like re-identify with who I was without that person in my life. And then I just made some really bad choices around who I was pursuing. We'll just leave that there.
Will we?
So, I mean, you've ridden this roller coaster ride with me for the last 14 years, from meant to be's to hot torso guy to, I mean, all just, it was a learning phase for sure. I think I had to look at why do I keep attracting these specific types of people, especially
for sure. Yeah.
emotionally unavailable people. And you realize that you have to make some changes, but that's not on them, that's on me. That for whatever reason, I'm attracting that,
No, 100%.
So,
and I would say through the course of that 14 years, like you have changed a lot. And so as you've changed, some of like the why are you still single has changed. Like, it's for different reasons at different times, kind of thing.
Yes. Now, if this was in reference to me putting up an application for whoever wants to go to Disney, like your 50th the epic trip, apply, Kevin. I mean, you never know. I haven't put the application process up on the website yet, but once I get settled, once I move and get settled again, it's at the top of my epic to-do list. So
and the hubby and I love stranger danger. So
yes they do. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in that whatsoever.
Nope.
So I hope that answers your question, Kevin, in Tucson. There's that. I should write a blog post about that, maybe. I don't know, or do like a solo episode on like why I'm still single. Like, let's dive into this.
Oh, it could be fun.
Pretty deep.
It could be fun, but I want it run by me so I can keep you honest.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Okay. So this one's directed at you, and I think this is hilarious. Brian, what are your dogs' names so we know who you are yelling at every time?
Oh, yes. Okay, so you probably won't hear me yelling at them today because I actually sat in a different spot in the house today, as you can see behind me, for that exact reason. I thought, I'm going to make it all the way through one of these without screaming at the dogs. The dogs' names are Porter and Stout, as in the beers. My husband and I spend too much time at breweries. We have a beer room, not currently because of where we're currently living, but it will be reinstated once we move into our house. So we travel and we drink beer. That's our two jams. So we've
Although
been
you're
to
not
25
drinking beer
countries. Not a whole lot. I'm trying to think last time I had a beer. It's been a long time since I had a beer.
Yeah.
I did have a cocktail the other night.
Oh. Speaking of falling off the wagon.
But yeah, so Porter and Stout, and we've talked about once we get a house,
don't say
getting a third dog, whose name would be Hazy.
Oh, I like that.
See?
I like that. Yeah. I mean, if I was ever going to get and everybody keeps saying this whenever you tell them that like my dog's name is Crosby, they're like, oh, when are you going to get Stills and Nash? I actually think it'd be great to get a dog named Nash. Stills, I'm like, that doesn't really work for a dog name, but I don't know. Well,
someone told Jim yesterday that after we get Hazy, if we were crazy enough to get a fourth, that its name should be Amber. And Jim and I were both like, how the hell did we not think of that? Right. And so we've got both Porter and Stout are boys. And Hazy will obviously be a girl. And then we were like, oh, that'd mean like the next two are girls if we went with Hazy and Amber.
I I like Heffy too, though.
That sounds. I won't say that on here.
I think I knew.
It's
I
a
think I know.
little too close to heifer.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm thinking like El Jefe, like boss in
Oh
Spanish.
yeah,
You know?
no, I could. Yeah, El Jefe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I might be able to get on board with that one.
Uh-huh. I like that. I like that. So that came from Amanda in San Diego. So now you know all about the dog sitch.
If I move back out to the main room for the next podcast, I'll make sure they get included on camera.
Perfect.
But I set up in
Yeah.
a back bedroom today, so
Yes.
they are not part of today's visit.
I think that would be good. Porter is my dog's arch nemesis, like the two dog.
Yeah.
Like Porter loves Crosby. Crosby wants nothing to
Don't
do with
you don't
Porter.
love Porter so much.
Dog dynamics. Okay. So this comes from Matt in Murfreesboro, which I think is by you ish.
That's us.
Okay.
It's over by Nash.
Gotcha. Okay. I thought it sounded familiar. Thank you for sharing Young Pueblo's book. I bought it and really enjoyed it. Any other recommendations of books like this?
Ooh.
The only one I could think of when I read that was Rupi Kaur. Her book, Milk and Honey. I think she has several now, but it's more poetry
for sure.
based.
Milk and Honey, short poetry.
Have you read any other poetry?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I've got to come up with the name though. We're Googling.
I packed all my books already, so I don't have all my books out. I feel like there's other poetry that I've read, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. So
it's pretty dark. It's so it's not nearly as light as Young Pueblo is. It's pretty dark stuff. But The Princess Saves Herself in this one by Amanda Lovelace.
Yeah.
I enjoyed. It's got some dark content in it though, so just know that going into it.
And quick read. I think I read that in like a day at your house.
Yep.
So yeah.
And then I believe her significant other at the time. And I do not remember the name of his books, but his name is Parker Lee.
Okay.
Same style. And then, I mean, not poetry, but along Young Pueblo. Ooh. I don't know. I mean, I guess
I know.
kind of Ram Dass a little bit, like Be Here Now.
Yeah.
Not definitely not the same short poetry style, but
no. And sometimes a little bit like, I mean, he did, let's just be honest, people, he did a lot of acid. And so a lot of his books are stuff that he wrote when he was tripping. So it's a little like existential to a point. It's like you have to be in the right mindset, I think, to read Ram Dass. There's also a really great Audible series called Experiments in Truth it's like this compilation of all the talks that he did through like the 60s and 70s. And it's surprisingly relevant to like even today.
Sure.
So that would be another good, like, I guess, resource in a sense to listen to. We will work on a list, and I will put this in the show notes. And I'm going to say I will put this in the show notes for sure, because I get called out here shortly about not putting stuff in the show notes. Sorry, peeps. But yeah, I will put a list of these, and if I come up with any more, then I will add those to the list.
I'll have to scroll back through my Amazon purchase list.
Yeah, and I know, like, so on my website too, there's a resources page where I list like all. Now it hasn't been updated in quite some time, but I list all the books that I've read that have to do with like personal growth, these sorts of things. So that would be another good, I guess, resources to tap into to look at for a book list. I read a lot, and that's why it hasn't been updated in a long time, because it just got to like where I was having to do that too often, where I maybe just need to write the books down and like once a month, just go add it in kind of thing, instead of trying to do it on the fly. So thanks, Matt, for the question. And I'm glad that you enjoyed the book. He's amazing. If you haven't read all of his other books, Inward and Clarity and Connection and Lighter are the names of those, I would say dive into those fully. He's super talented. This is just a comment for us. So aiming in Paris, and I'm like, I don't know if this is Paris, France, or if this is Paris, Texas.
Paris, Texas.
You know, I don't know. But
Paris,
Amy
California.
says the episode where you did the note cards was the best yet. Keep that in the mix. It was hilarious.
Okay.
Truly hilarious. So, okay, the next one comes from Greg with 2 G's. This is a theme, the G's, all the G's.
One at the beginning and one at the end. We're all super smart.
Well, 2 G's at the end. 3 G's then. 3G Greg.
3G Greg.
That's your new name, Greg. So he says, RE, loneliness epidemic. I do think Brian's opinion that loneliness is a choice is a bit off. Just making the decision to go out more and talk to people doesn't mean that they are going to reciprocate. I too have found it hard to develop meaningful connections with people in this distracted, noisy world. I don't know that there's a solution to this, but I just thought I would share my view on it.
I mean, I certainly didn't mean to come off as it's as simple as like walking out the front door and talking to the first stranger by any means. I understand that it's not that easy. And I also have I have a unique job in that I work with a crew of people and I see people all day long. I guess
I think he's right. And I don't think what you were saying is just like by going out and doing things. I think, like we talked about, like going to get your groceries instead of doing like the Albertsons or whatever, drive up
right.
and pick up things.
I think,
and not everybody's going to reciprocate in those, but it's like you're opening up the potential
possibility
opportunities
for something to happen. Yes.
Yeah.
If you don't create opportunities for yourself, then, and I guess that's more like what I was trying to say is that if you don't create opportunities, then it's definitely not going to happen.
Right. Nor should you try to develop a meaningful connection with every single person that crosses your path. Like you have to find.
Want to be my friend?
That could be weird. Maybe stalking a little bit. Kevin.
And more what I meant, like in some situations is, like if you do have a friend group, but you don't feel super close to them kind of thing, you can facilitate, and not that it's always going to get picked up, but you could facilitate inviting people over to your place. Instead of constantly complaining that no one ever plans anything, or they always ask short notice, or these are examples from my own life. Like this is not like pointing the finger at anybody else. These are conversations that have happened in my house that, God, we would have hung out, but they asked us too late, and all of these things. And then it's like, if you're not going to be the person that does the inviting, and you're not going to be the person that does the hosting and stuff like that, then you don't have as much room to talk about being lonely. If you want to be closer with those people, like facilitate it, invite those people to your house. You orchestrate the get together. And I think, and then it goes back to the creating the opportunities. If you don't create any, then it's your own fault.
Right.
And that's what I meant by it is, I think self-isolating is a choice. It doesn't necessarily mean that being lonely is a choice, but definitely making sure you're not going to remedy it is, to me, a choice.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I was thinking about this too, it was like, a lot of people go out and they kind of search for like-minded individuals or people that are interested in the same things that I'm interested in. That's a great way to find people that you can connect to easily because you have that thing in common. But I also see the dark side of that, where it's like you can just end up in an echo chamber where you're just hearing the same things, same ideas, same everything all the time.
And sometimes get bored of it. I mean,
yeah. So I think too, when you're opening yourself up to opportunities, open yourself up to maybe people that you haven't been exposed to, or that maybe have a different opinion on something, or their interests may be completely different than yours, but who knows, like you may find interest in something that they're active in and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, though, is that the more opportunities you create to connect with people, whether that be going to the grocery store, whether that be facilitating things in your home instead of waiting for people to invite you to them. And you're right, I agree with him. We are in a very distracted, noisy world. There's a lot of static out there.
Yep.
It's hard to make, I think it's harder to make connections than it used to be
Oh, for sure.
in the past.
100%.
But I think get creative with it. Get creative with how you are opening up that possibility. Yeah. Okay, so Sabrina in Topeka, Kansas.
Real quick, who was the last question from?
That was from Greg in Decatur. Is that Georgia?
Decatur, Georgia.
But Decatur
Spend a
could...
weekend in Knoxville. We'll hang out.
There you go.
Decatur, Nebraska. Not so easy.
Yeah, Decatur, Georgia. 3G Greg, you just reach out because you've got a meaningful connection.
Yeah, friends in
right
Knoxville,
there.
man.
Yep. And you've already got a nickname for like. That's how we show people that we really love them, as we give them
and
nicknames.
I already said, Jim and I love stranger danger. So.
Right. Yep. Super fun. Okay, so Sabrina in Topeka. You guys are always talking about other podcasts you listen to, but they aren't always listed in the show notes. My bad.
Busted.
Sorry, it's a lot of work sometimes to like get all the resources listed. I'm sorry, I will do better than this, Sabrina. Can you list a few that are your favorites and put them in the show notes?
Yeah, for sure. I'll hold her to task on this one. I'll bug her every day until it gets done.
Oh boy.
I've
got my pen ready so that I can write these all down.
I definitely have my top 5 kind of thing. But
okay, so Brian's top 5, go.
Oh, who do I listen to the most? Hold on, I'm just gonna jump over and tell you right off my list. I mean, if we're all okay, definitely Know Thyself podcast.
Okay. Andre DeCume.
Yep. Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson.
Love him.
Rich Roll podcast.
Love him too.
Lex Friedman. And then we come into a bunch of different ones. I have to pick. I mean, I listen to a lot.
I know, I do too. I'm like, how do I pick my favorite? It's like picking a favorite child. And I think maybe Sabrina too, you've heard us talk about this in some of the episodes, that it's like, sometimes we go through like dry spells with certain podcasts where it's like, I have zero interest whatsoever in what you're talking about for the last 5 episodes. And then the 6th one is like gold. I mean, so
right.
Whenever we suggest these, it's not like it's going to be a home run every single week, every single time. I think there are podcasts that trend more on the home run every time.
I'm going to go with 6. So my next one would be Uncomfortable Conversations with Josh Steps.
I don't even know about that one.
And I have not listened to them in a very, very long time, but if I was like brand new and starting at the beginning, I'm going to give their name wrong because all I can think of is their company, The Wild Within. What's the podcast?
Shoot.
Hold on.
I literally cannot remember the name of that podcast. Wow.
Oh my word, I'm failing miserably. I haven't listened to them in quite a while. They kind of went a different direction than I was interested in at the time.
I know, and I haven't listened to them probably since I was in Spokane, because I think they just kind of went in a direction. They started getting really into like the Jungian stuff, which granted, I think Carl Jung is a fucking brilliant human being. It just was like too much of that for, I don't know. That night,
the Far Out podcast.
The Far Out. Yeah. I do believe that you have to like upgrade your teachers or like change out teachers so that you're not in that echo chamber of like listening to the same material all the
I
time.
had 2 years of solid stuff that I got from them.
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. They were great. I mean, same thing with like Mark Groves. I listened to him
No,
for
true.
like 2
That's
or 3
another one.
years, and I very rarely, like, sometimes I'll jump over and be like, what's Mark up to these days, and like see what's on his list, but he's not in, I'm not following at this point in time. So I
There
don't
we
know.
go. Add those to the show notes. I'm on you.
Okay. So I would say my top 5 to not repeat. So some of the ones that you mentioned, Modern Wisdom, Rich Roll, Know Thyself, I follow and listen to on a regular basis. Tim Ferriss, obviously.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And not so much to like I mean, it is great with like the entrepreneurship, the business side of things, but I also like that he samples with a lot of different podcast formats. So it's inspirational for me in that sense of like, you know, now he does the walking podcasts where he's out like walking around, so that he's getting exercise while he's doing the podcast. I'm like, I love that idea. I just don't know how the equipment setup would work. The next one would be The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, Mark Manson's new podcast. So he's only like 40 episodes in, but it's great. Let's see here. Huberman. I mean, I feel like that's, if AG1 is like the sponsor of podcasts, Huberman is like the AG1 of podcasting. Every freaking buddy listens to him. And he's a hit and miss one. And he's a little bit dry sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. But
he's just been on a stretch for me. There's a perfect example. He's just been on a stretch for me of 4 or 5 episodes now that I
don't
am
care.
not that interested in.
Yeah.
But I know full, like, when the next one comes around that does apply to something I'm interested in, I'll be like the first one listening to it. So
right. Yep. And then I would say probably the next one for me would be Sam Harris's Making Sense. Again, not every episode for me is a home run. He talks a lot about like the war in Gaza. He talks a lot about the religion of Islam. I enjoy him when he brings on, I'm trying to think who he had recently. I honestly can't remember who it was. Oh, Amanda Knox. Remember her? From like way back when she got. And it was a great episode. Talking about like resilience and how you make it through like these hard situations. So there's a lot of politics in there, not super like diving into that, but I think he has a good perspective on a lot of things.
Agreed.
And I like his voice. He's got a sexy voice. And then I guess my last one would be Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. Funny shit. Okay. So those are ours. And I wrote every single one of these down, Sabrina, so that I can put them into the show notes.
And that's like 10 hours a week for you. So you're welcome.
I mean, that would be like the warning label I would put on that. Like all of these guys are like 2 hour-ish plus.
2 plus hours.
Episodes.
And so if you've got a long commute, perfect.
Yeah. Long road trip, great. Binge
and
out on
time.
that. Yeah.
Gym time is another way to multitask.
I will say that Mark Manson's, I think he keeps all of his to under an hour, as does Sam Harris for the most part. So yeah. Okay. On to the next one. So this comes from April, and I don't know how to pronounce this. Is it Eau Claire? I know this is in Wisconsin.
Eau Claire.
Eau Claire.
Okay. Eau
Claire. Does losing your stepdad make you rethink your relationship with bio dad? And I honestly, I'm going to be honest, I did not go back and listen to the episode where we talked about bio dad and like if I shared what your current relationship is with him and my current relationship with it.
Sure.
But I'm just going to approach this, I think, from a more broad aspect. Did it make me think about that relation? Sure. I haven't been in contact with bio dad. Jesus. It's been a really long time. There's been a few maybe messages or phone calls in there, but very short, nothing of substance. He calls me looking for you, which is super irritating. Have you talked to your brother recently? No. Well, yes, but don't call me for that kind of thing. And maybe that's just him trying to open the window of opportunity. I don't know. But so I mean, yeah, in a sense, yes, in general speak, it did make me rethink that. What about you?
Um, so my rethinking of it preceded losing Mark. I had already been on somewhere along my midlife crisis. Uh, I had already been on a thought process of grudges suck. Like I try not to hold a grudge with anybody. Um, and I'm trying to think of the validity of that statement in my life. I don't think I hold any grudges. Um, I can't think of anybody that I like actively
I don't know.
just
Our
don't.
sister.
I still talk to her, just not a lot. I don't know about grudge as much as I just keep very healthy boundaries. Um, but I had already figured out that that time was limited in the grand scheme of things. I had also figured out, at some point someone told me that like blaming your parents and hanging on to that shit for too long was just toxic. That as horrible of parents as at times they might have been, they were still doing the best they were capable of. Um, and that opened up the door. It just changed my perspective of it. Certainly didn't get me singing like, "Oh, I had the best dad ever." No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Um, and we've acknowledged that him and I have actually talked specifically about like you kind of sucked, uh, and
You were a
that goes
great
along.
friend. You were a bad dad. Like,
Yeah, and it goes along with having talked with my stepmom as well, who acknowledged that was a big one for me. Is that, oh, other people saw that he kind of
yeah.
sucked.
Mhm.
Um, and then I felt very validated through that. And then I was like, oh, so it is okay to like recognize that he wasn't the best, but there's also nothing I can do to change that. And the only thing I have control over is what's in front of me. And so and these are all just things I realized over the course of time that I can sit here and be angry about it forever, or I can set a new narrative and make an effort and let things go and start building a new relationship.
Yeah.
So I had done that with Mark, um, probably too late in all reality, but I had done it, and with my bio dad, oh, we're probably going on 6 or 7 years now of me making an effort to um, have him as an active part of my life. So I talk regularly with him. I see him about once a year. Um, and yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I'm holding a grudge towards him in any sense. Like, I feel like that's all water under the bridge at this point. I don't know. I guess in a sense, well, I mean, I have to put this back on myself because I'm like, I don't think the opportunity for reconnection has been presented, but I also haven't created that opportunity,
Right.
like actively tried to create that opportunity. Um, but I guess maybe part of that is like the rethinking of the relationship where it was like, you know, the thought has crossed my mind more often now where it's like, I really need to make sure that I'm bridging that gap
Right.
while there's still time to bridge that gap and not have the
Yep.
regret of I didn't have a relationship or wasn't able to like say the things that I needed to say before you can't say them anymore. So, ooh, that one dug a little bit. Okay. Which now we're going to lighten the load a little bit here. Eli in Reno, dog cuisine, exclamation point. This
Dog
segment,
cuisine.
yes, this segment was so damn funny. Do you write down your recipes? And if so, would you be willing to share them?
Oh, I will definitely put together some. You got to give me a couple weeks. We've got a lot going on the next couple weeks, but if nothing else, maybe we can spend some time when we're in Colorado. Um, I will throw some recipe cards in my suitcase. That's easy to pack along. And we can definitely
I mean,
do
you could
dog
make
recipes.
cuisine for Crosby, you know?
I
It's already
will
going to
make
be his best
cuisine for
week ever.
Crosby. Right? No, I totally will. That's perfect. I will make the cuisine and you write down the cuisine that we
Okay.
make for Cross while we're together.
Yes. I will post links to those once we get them, Eli. I have your email. I will respond to your email, let you know when they are posted, and send you a link to the documents with the doggo recipes. Enjoy them, make them with love, you know. I think that's
And don't go
hilarious.
broke, man. Don't
Yeah.
go broke.
It doesn't have to be Wagyu liver every time. Okay, Gail in Des Moines. I'm going to be honest with you, Gail. I'm not really sure how to answer this one because it's kind of a little bit vague, ambiguous. How do you know when it's time to end a relationship?
Ooh.
And I'm like, an intimate relationship, a relationship with a family member, all of the above, a relationship
I've
at
got a
work.
decent answer for that though.
Okay.
When you take inventory of it and the scales are tipped, when you are no longer benefiting from the relationship more than you are suffering from it.
Yeah.
Like no relationship is all roses ever.
No.
And so it's like you take stock and you're like, this is what I am getting out of this relationship, and this is what this relationship is costing me. And the moment it's costing you more than you're getting out of it, it's time to reevaluate whether or not you can change it to alter that some, or whether it's time to cut it loose.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. I think this almost goes back to sometimes to what I was talking about in my response to Kevin. I think sometimes we get to a point where we do have to do some work on ourselves, and relationships are hard. They take a lot of effort and work. And if it's something that is just taking more than what you have to offer at the time, I think there's a benefit to being realistic about that and being honest about that with whoever you're in the relationship with, that it's like, look, I'm just the space where I really need to focus on me right now. And that could apply to family as well as
No, and
intimate
that's the
relationships.
cost. It's costing you time.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah. I think also too, like, when you do that inventory, be really honest with yourself about like, how important is it to me to maintain this relationship? Like, what's I don't know, I guess when I look at this, I'm like, the investment that's already been made, is this just a rough patch in the relationship and it's making you feel, like in a 10-year span of a relationship, like, how much of that is a rough patch and how much of it is like smooth sailing?
So you and I have talked about this as far as my marriage is concerned. And I'm going to use easy numbers. These are not exact numbers by any means, but at some point during the first 8 years, we had a really bad year. And I remember talking with you that is a cycle I would be willing to repeat for eternity. So if I get 7 great years and one really shitty year, repeat ad nauseum, I'm okay with that. Like, so at the extreme, because we're all going to be living to 150 now, if I had 70 good years with Jim and 10 shitty ones, solid.
Right.
Sign me up.
Yeah. But if it's
And
a
that year
constant
was
roller coaster where you're
horrible.
like, it's 6 months on, 6 months off, 6 months,
Right.
that's fucking stressful.
No, for
To
sure.
ride
And
that. So
the the sum of that at the end is half your time was spent
Yeah.
shitty. And that would be a whole different perspective for
Yep.
me if I was like, half the time I'm miserable.
Yep.
Um,
Life's
but
short, man.
one eighth of the time miserable, yeah,
Yeah.
I can put up with 1/8 of the time miserable.
Yeah.
For 7/8 of amazing.
Speaking of relationship with work, I'm like, I'm definitely miserable more than 1/8 of the time. So
There's another one. I mean, no, but there's like another one. It's like, you're making good money at what cost?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if one side is great schedule and you're making great money, is it worth, the stomach ulcer? um, the stomach ulcer, the being talked down to, that, like, whatever the bad is. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes, I mean, there's definitely a limit for me. If you pay me enough, shit on me all day long. Like, I'm okay with that. But you're gonna pay for it, because at
Yeah.
that point, those scales for me, um, you can do whatever you want, because I can just sit there and bask in the fact that, like, I'm getting rich off this.
Well, and I think it depends on too, on like what kind of suffering are you willing to put up with?
Right.
Like, I know
Yep.
this from leaving healthcare and starting in entrepreneurship. That shit is not easy. It is a
Right.
suffer fest every single day, because it's like you are accountable to you. You're the only one that can make something happen to get income rolling in. You're dependent upon people like wanting your service and like how you're approaching the marketing thing, which that's a whole different like stress ball in itself. Versus, so do I trade that for what feels like a soul sucking career in healthcare? It's like, so I have to look at like, what kind of suffering do I want to deal with? Do I want to deal with the stress and the roller coaster ride of an entrepreneurship, or do I want to deal with what I feel like is doing work that is not necessarily my passion or my
Right.
calling in an industry that is very unethical, and like we talked about in our last episode, that is like a values conflict every single day that you go in there.
Right.
It just depends on what kind of suffering you're willing to put up with.
Yep.
So, okay. Kim in Boise, when it comes to your dad passing, what is your biggest regret? By the way, I think it is so beautiful that you have shared this experience so openly on the podcast. I think it normalizes talking about death and grief.
Biggest regret. I certainly don't take all the blame. I also don't pass all the blame. But somewhere in there, I wish I would have been more honest, even if it was negative. Um, and so when he drove out to Oregon and saw you, but couldn't come 2 hours south to see me,
Yeah.
um, I wish I would have called and been like, "Hey, asshole," because I think it might have let him know that it was important to me. But so I didn't feel important because he didn't come down and see us, but I think he thought it wasn't important to us because I didn't say anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish I had maintained a level of accountability for both myself and for him in that relationship. Um, Along with that, I wish by the end I told him, like, he was trying to cover up the fact that he had alcoholic cirrhosis,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to just like straight up like, "Hey, let's not pretend anymore."
Yeah.
Um, and I regret, and this doesn't mean I wish I would have gotten into it with him. But I wish I would have said 3 years earlier, "Hey, I know you have a drinking problem. We
Right.
all know
Right.
you have a drinking problem." Um, uh, Back to the advice that I gave at the start of this episode. I just wish I would have said, like, "Hey, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that I don't care about you, but you can, if you want to get hammered and still call me, you can still call me all hammered.
Yeah.
I'm okay
Yeah.
with that. Um, at least then we get to talk, and at least then I know you're okay or not okay, or
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think I assumed he wasn't calling because he was not in a great place, and I think the longer that went, the longer he thought it was okay that he didn't call. And really, I think we were both sitting on opposite ends of that conversation, wishing that it had been different.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really see that until the end, when I did reconnect with him. And I think we both realized I should have spoken up about all the things earlier, and it would have gone maybe same outcome,
Right.
but it would have been a better relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess in a sense, like a little bit of like my biggest regret would be that I didn't make more of an effort in the last few years to go back more often, knowing that he wasn't going to make the trip out for, I mean, probably the reason was at the point where he was drinking so much that he couldn't drink and drive and make a road trip
Right.
up there. That I didn't make more of an effort to go back and see him. I think the same thing, to being honest with him, like maybe when I left in 2018, like saying like, look, I know that you relapsed. And if you want
Right.
help, if you need help and you're open to that, like I'm here. And
Right.
but if this is the decision that you made and this is what you want for yourself, then again, no judgment, like drink yourself silly.
Right.
That's your
And
choice.
and we had just some things along the way, like that when the tremor
Mm-hmm.
started, and when the liver function test came back so crazy,
Yeah.
and we all let him lie.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
instead of just being like,
yeah,
look, we know.
Right.
Yeah.
You can call it what you want, but we all know it's this.
We're not, I mean, that's the funny thing. It's like, we're not stupid. Like all of us work in healthcare. Like we know
Right.
these things. I think the only other regret that I have is like when I went to take care of him, I really, really believed, and I think all of us believed that recovery was possible, in the sense of like, it was going to be work, it was going to be effort. But I really thought that he was going to at least get to a point where, especially if he'd gotten a hip replacement, that he would be almost semi-independent again. At least being able to move and walk around, whether or not he got the liver transplant, et cetera. I mean, there was a lot of things, variables up in the air, but I really thought like, it's not like we're going to have another 12 years with him, but we're going to have some time, a couple years,
Right.
maybe 5-6 years, depending on the liver thing. And then it happened so fast. And it was like, I think I took for granted some of the time that I had with him, thinking that there was going to be more time.
More time. Yeah.
And then when that didn't happen, it was like, if I had known, I mean, and you can't know, but I'm like, I wish I would have gone in with the other perspective of like, this is limited time, and
Right.
really appreciating the time that I had with him.
Sure.
Because there were some days that I was like, man, you are a pain in my ass.
Right.
And instead of like feeling that, I wanted to feel, like just appreciative of that I get the time, and I should be appreciating that you are a pain in my ass and I get to be here. So
yeah. I don't know, I'm pretty comfortable with how things.
Yeah.
By the time I left in May, I still thought we had a couple months. I mean, I had originally planned on coming right back out as soon as we got home from Spain.
I don't think anybody expected it to be what it was.
Like 2 weeks or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like I was not expecting 2 weeks. I was expecting 2 months.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would have changed anything. I would have been better prepared.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. Okay. So that's all of them. I feel like this is going to be the shortest Wide Open Aperture episode ever, because normally
are we at an hour and a half, or what are we at?
I think we're probably at around an hour, because we chatted for a long time at the beginning of this.
Okay.
So I am going to share that our next episode, what we are going to be, we're going to be talking about a podcast that we listened to. So this is from the Know Thyself podcast. I will also put this in the show notes, Sabrina. So that if you want to listen to it before we record the episode, so then you like know what the podcast episode is
See,
about.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get them involved. Let's get these peeps involved.
On that note, if anyone wants to like shoot questions about it,
Yeah.
like before we actually record, that'd be fantastic. I don't know how that timing will go. But yeah, and I like that we're calling it out from the front. That gives me a little bit of time to. I've listened to it probably 5 times now.
I know.
But
I
it's
listened to it like 3 times. Yes, it is a lot. It is a lot. And it's like, I mean, like I told Brian yesterday, I'm like, the first time I listened to it and she said the word fractal, it was like, oh boy, like head explosion.
Yep.
It hit and landed so much more with me now. But I think a lot of that is because a lot of the things that she says really tie into Kabbalah. And I've been studying that like a lot. And it's like, yeah, no, a lot of the stuff that she says is very much like the same principles that Kabbalah is about. So maybe that's why it landed more with me, is because I've like familiarized myself with that. But no, I think that's a great idea. Send your questions in. If it's not a question, just a part of the podcast, maybe that like resonated with you, or that you are like, that absolutely did not resonate with me. Send them all in. We could answer those when we do.
Yeah, I'd love to hear them. And then I'll be real prepared with that one.
Yeah. It's a good one. It's a good one, but like we're saying, it might take a couple listens to like fully wrap your noodle around all of it. All right. Well, I will see you in 2 weeks in Colorado.
Yeah, you will. It's not even 2 weeks now, is it?
I think it's like,
aren't we just a week and 4 days or something?
12 days or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, thanks for coming on, answering questions, and
loved it.
In the next episode, we'll just focus that one too on just that podcast, because I think that's a whole, like,
I agree.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
When I listened to it again this morning, I was like, oh, like there's it's nice because it's broken down into segments, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's like 5 different things we can jump through. So
for sure. All right, Bren.
All right.
Till next time.
Later, Gator.